How you communicate in sales is so incredibly important, and the words you say matter a lot more than a lot of salespeople actually think. So this is going to be a full training on a framework that I've personally learned from selling, and I heard this from somebody else. I will not steal the thunder, but I actually heard this framework through Alex Hormozi. If you're not following his content, I'd highly recommend it. But I took the framework that he shared in his training, and I made this for real estate agents, and this is something that I've used in my practice. This is the same, I'll say, consultative sales approach that I was originally trained on. And I'm gonna give you the exact scripts that we use here at Onyx Homes. We train our agents on, and they work really well for me. They work really well for us. So if you want to implement them into your business, you absolutely can as well too. If you're just watching these videos, there's a whole bunch of resources. So make sure you reach out, go to onyxhomes.com/blog. Make sure you're on there as well too. That'll have everything you need. And there's also a community where this full course is at. If you're not already in that start to finish community, definitely need to be in it. All right, let's dive in. I've got my notes down here. So if you see me looking down at my screen, it is. So this is the closer framework. Now, I hate that it's called closer because it's not like coffees for closers or anything like that. I'm gonna start with the goal is to walk your prospect down a path that makes the most sense for them. Now that doesn't mean it makes the most sense for you, but the goal is to walk the prospect down a path that makes the most sense for them. And if you do it enough times, you're going to have a lot of wins in your business. You're gonna create a lot of value for your consumers. And my favorite thing that's ever happened in my entire sales career is when I get finished selling somebody something and they look at me and they say, Christian, you should be in sales. And the reason they say that, and that I've heard that in the past, is that they don't feel like I'm a salesperson. They feel like I'm a consultant helping them make the right decision. So this is the framework that helps me accomplish that. I'm gonna have several different pro tips in here as well too, as well as a couple of different stories. Pro tip number one is that the solution that makes the most sense for them might not make the most sense for you. And in real estate, a really easy example is you might want a lead to buy a property. And the thing that might make the most sense for them is for them to rent a property. So that might not be your dream outcome, but that might be theirs, and that's okay. So that's pro tip number one. Now let's dive in with the closer framework. I'm gonna break this down into 3 different sections. Number 1 is curiosity. Number 2 is solution. And number 3 is confirm. So you are going to stay curious long enough to present a solution, and then you're going to confirm that you are on the same page with your prospect or your lead that is turning into a client. Now again, as much as I hate the fact that this is the closer framework, I think it just frankly makes sense and I don't want to change it around. So here is what the closer stands for. C is for clarify. So we were trying to understand why. Number 2 is label. So if you're not familiar with label, here is another, I don't know if there's a pro tip in here or not, but this is go buy the book, Never Split the Difference, listen to the audio. Chris Voss is an FBI negotiator, have to have that. So C is for clarify, L is for label, O is for overview. This is understanding what the lead or the prospect has done so far to solve the problem. So you're gonna clarify so that you can label their pain. You're gonna overview what they've done so far. So that is the beginning portion. Next is S is for sell. This is where you're gonna sell your solution. E is for explain, and R is for review. So it's clarify, label, overview, sell, explain, review. That is the closer framework, at least that's what it stands for. So we're gonna dive in, breaking down each point. Now here's pro tip number 2. If you can remove sales-based questions from your early conversations, you are not gonna likely have to ask as many sales-based questions, or you're going to have way more rapport or trust built with your leads before you need to ask sales-based questions, and then you'll get real responses. So let's dive into what sales-based questions really look like. So picture this, you're walking into Nordstrom's and you're looking for a new jacket. I just did this recently. And immediately somebody in the store comes up to you and they say, hey, what are you looking for? How can I help you? Right, this is a sales-based question, and our gut response is, I'm just looking, I'm just browsing, whatever. And then 4 minutes later, you're walking around looking for a particular jacket, which is why you went to Nordstrom in the first place. And you're looking around like, does anybody work here? This is insane. And you just had a salesperson who came up to you and they asked a sales-based question. And we naturally say, not interested. No, get away from me. Because that is what humans want to do. And when we hear as a consumer, how can I help you? What we really hear is, how can I sell something to you? Or what can I sell you? Now, does this sound familiar in your real estate business? I really hope it doesn't, but I'm gonna guess it probably does. Now, if you're going to take the same thing as how can I help you and just change your language, right? And just change your language. So instead of saying how can I help you, start with I'm sure you're here to just look around. What direction can I point you in? The person will have to turn their brain on and respond because they can't say, no, I'm not interested, I'm not whatever, without being incredibly rude, unless they're really just not listening. When you say something along the lines of, I'm sure you came in to just look around, which direction can I point you in? Oh, I'm looking for jackets. That's fantastic, they're over here. What kind of jackets are you looking for? Now we are in a little bit of a conversation, so you're able to help that person out a little bit better versus what can I sell you or how can I help you? So this is an easy change, but I'm trying to help you understand, not so much scripting here, more so understanding that sales-based questions turn people off, literally, and they put up a block wall because there's sales skepticism. So that's number one, is your sales-based questions. Here are some common sales-based questions that you were probably taught, and if you weren't taught, maybe skip through this. If you were taught, I would recommend forgetting them. This is something that I was taught very early on, and I very quickly chose to forget. You've probably heard LP Mama, which stands for location, price, motivation, agent, mortgage, appointment. I'm so glad I have to look at my notes to remember what that is. So here's what this scripting sounds like, and this is exactly what sales-based questions sounds like. L is for location. This is saying where you're supposed to ask your client or your lead, where do you want to move? Price, what's your budget? Motivation, why do you want to move? Agent, do you have an agent? Mortgage, are you pre-approved? An appointment, set an appointment. This is not a consultative sales approach. This is an interrogation sales approach. If you were able to walk through a conversation and go through this, where do you want to move? What is your budget? Why do you want to move? Do you have an agent? Are you pre-approved? Okay, let's set an appointment. What is the benefit to the consumer in that conversation? Nothing. The only benefit is to the salesperson. If you're able to get through that script, you interrogated your lead. So this can work. This is qualifying leads, I suppose, but I don't think it's the most effective sales approach. So I assume you're watching this because you want to increase your sales skills. So my advice so far is to forget the sales-based questions and to open with curiosity-based questions, which is what the closer framework is all about. Now, here's the goal for this, is you want your consumer to look at you as a consultant, not a salesperson. All right, we're gonna dive here into section one, which is clarify. Now, within the clarify section, there are 3 different points. There is the C, L, O, and closer. So section one is curiosity, and we are going to start by clarifying their why. We are going to label their pain point, and we're going to ask, overview, what they've done so far to make that happen. You cannot, or you should not, present a solution to a lead or prospect without you truly understanding why in the world they're looking to make a move in the first place, what is the pain that's causing that move, and what they've done so far to make that move happen. You should not be presenting a solution to somebody that you do not understand. That is sales, not a consultant. So a quote that I love from Phil Jones is, you have to stay curious long enough to be able to provide a solution that they can say yes to. This is Phil Jones, awesome sales trainer. So you really cannot move somebody forward until you truly understand their why. So what I mean by why is their motivation and timeline, right? Why in the world are they looking to move? Why? So motivation is why do they want to move? Timeline is when do they want to move? So let's dive into clarify. So this is a big chunk here. And if you're taking notes, this is where I would definitely start. But again, we have a full download for all of this as well too. So we're clarifying their why. We want to understand their motivation and timeline. Here is a lesson that we're going to talk about over and over and over again, something I learned rather early on in sales. And a quote that I also like is, little hinges swing big doors. I like to ask open-ended questions that will lead to a ton more information. So typically a sales-based question, what is your price point, is you're gonna get an answer. I would rather ask an open-ended question and try to get way more information than what I'm actually asking for. So how do we do this? It's by learning, this is the scripting that we're gonna go through, it is by learning the questions that you can ask to every single lead or prospect that is a little hinge that swings a big door and gets you way more information. Now here is the key point to this, is when you start asking these questions, it's gonna open up these big doors. You're going to have to practice your active listening skills, meaning you're gonna have to really listen to your consumer so that you can understand their motivation and timeline, which is their why. Now, I already said this, but this is your homework assignment. If you made it this far, go to Audible, go to Amazon, go to whatever, and download Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss and learn this book. This is not a book to read, let's say. This is a book to study sales. This is something I go through and re-listen to and read at least once a year. Something I highly recommend you do as well too. So here are the major questions that I like. These are my favorites. We'll put them on the screen. You have them in the document as well too. Number one of my favorite questions to ask is, what is it you're looking to change about your current living situation? This is a question that's going to open up so much different stuff. If you run into somebody who is a outgoing personality, they might just tell you their entire life story, and that's the only question you needed to ask. They might tell you their pain, they might tell you everything. So that question is, what is it you're looking to change about your current living situation? The next one is, what is it about this home that has you thinking about making a move? So if you're dealing with a buyer and they are looking at a property, that's a great question, is what is it about this home that has you thinking about making a move? And if you hear my tone here, these are not sales-based questions. These are curiosity-based questions. So you can hear that I'm sounding curious. So, hey, what is it you're looking to change about your current living situation? So tone is also incredibly important as well too. So I'll kind of jump in and out. And you can hear my normal tone is how I'm talking to you right now, not what are you looking to change about your current living situation? Tilting my head, I'm curious, higher tone of voice, all these different things actually matter. Question number 3 is, what has you thinking about making a move? Now it's a little bit similar, but come in with curiosity. So what has you thinking about making a move is how you would ask this question. Now another one is when you're showing a property to somebody, so if this is a buyer you're talking to or a beller or whatever it is, and you're walking through a property, this is my absolute favorite question to ask, and make sure we're writing this down on our notes, is how does this house look in comparison to everything else that you've seen? Now, if this is your first time talking to somebody, maybe you're at an open house, this is your first time showing somebody a property, this is an amazing question. You're gonna get so many different answers from this. They're gonna tell you whether they have an agent or not. They're gonna tell you whether they've been looking out in person with other agents. They're gonna tell you if this is their very first house they've seen. Little hinges swing big doors. The question is, how does this house look in comparison to everything else you've seen? And they're gonna say, well, this is actually the first house I've looked at. Or they're gonna say, yeah, I saw a couple last week and that I thought were better. You're gonna ask, oh, did you go to open houses? Oh no, my agent was showing us. Great, I didn't have to ask, do you have an agent? I asked one easy question that led to another one that led to, now this person has an agent. You need to determine how you wanna move forward with that. Or they're gonna say, this is actually the first time we've gone out looking at properties. And you know that that person probably doesn't have an agent, and it's somebody that really probably needs your help most because they're early on in the process. So again, these open-ended questions, these why curiosity-based questions open the conversation for you to get a ton of information. All right, now pro tip number 3, this is for follow-up. Maybe you're calling in your database, or like Onyx Homes agents, we have an enormous database of leads of over 15, 20,000 leads in our database where agents can call on leads that have registered in the past, registered or open house, or whatever it might be. And you can switch this when somebody tells you they're no longer looking, they were looking and now they're not. You can agree with them not looking anymore and still ask the same questions. All you have to do is add a simple, when you were looking, what was it you were looking to change about your current living situation? And now we've agreed that they're not looking anymore. So when you were looking, what was it you were looking to change about your current living situation? And they're going to tell you why they were looking to move in the first place. And I kind of jokingly use the example if somebody tells you, well, we're in a 2-bedroom apartment, we got 7 kids, 5 dogs, 2 cats, and we really just need a lot more space, but real objection. And they're going to tell you whatever the objection is, and that is when you can try to move towards the solution, but you're in clarifying, you're in understanding why in the world they were looking to move in the first place. So I love this pro tip. Now, here are your questions for timeline, right? So now the first group of questions that I shared with you is to help you with motivation. Why were you looking to make a move in the first place? This is going to give you a simple question you can ask for both buyer and seller for timeline. So the question is, in a perfect world, when would you like to be moved into your new home? Obviously, that's a buyer. So in a perfect world, now we're creating a hypothetical fake scenario. When would you like to be moved into your new home? And this is going to help you narrow down on timeline. And if you're talking to a seller, in a perfect world, when would you like to finish the sale of your property or of your house? However you want to say that. So what you're going to do here is you're going to be able to dive in on what they actually say. So if I say, in a perfect world, when would you like to be moved into that new home? See, this curiosity is still there. And they're going to say, well, I want to be moved in by summer. What does that mean? You want to be moved in by, what is summer? June? Is it July? Is it whatever? So we're really able to actually establish a timeline without asking a really sales-based question. Now, as you're getting to know your prospect a little bit better, you're gonna get really good and really used to saying things like this. So tell me a little bit more about that. Why is that important? Oh, okay, so, and then what? And what happens in 6 months, 6 years, 6 days, 6 weeks? And then what? Where do you live now? How long have you been there? How do you like it? Those types of questions. So if somebody says something, so if you say, what is it you're looking to change about your current living situation? And they tell you something, you can say, well, yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. I'm curious. Or, oh, okay, so why is that important to you? Or if someone says they're waiting to move in 6 months, well, what happens in 6 months? What happens in summer? What happens whenever? And you're going to get deeper and deeper. So we're going to get in the habit of going down layer and layer and layer deep on the same question, as opposed to asking a bunch of questions at the surface level. I hope that makes sense, but you're going to get used to saying things that sound like this. Now, that leads me to pro tip number 4, is when you're about to ask a question that sounds a little bit more uncomfortable, maybe for the consumer, maybe you're uncomfortable asking it, is use this, is do you mind if I ask about your personal finances? Do you mind if I ask some personal questions? And then ask personal questions, maybe meaning finance questions. So before I ask anybody, and this came from a finance background, is before I would ask anybody how much money they make, credit score, anything like that, what is their comfort zone on price, anything money related, I would always soften the blow by saying, hey, do you mind if I ask a personal question? What is your comfort zone on price? Now, when I say, do you mind if I ask a personal question? They're like, whoa, what is he gonna ask? And then if I say, what is your comfort zone on price? That is not nearly as uncomfortable as they would have expected most of the time. Now here's a big thing. Maybe 10% of the time, somebody will actually say, yes, I do mind if you ask a personal question. And I'm so glad that I asked that question. Do you mind if I ask a personal question? And say, yep, I don't want to talk about anything personal. Okay, great. I obviously don't have any rapport. I've got a lot of work to do here. But if I ask, do you mind if I ask any personal questions? And they say, no, it's totally fine. I say, great. Do you mind sharing with me what your comfort zone is on price or payment or down payment or whatever? I can ask those different things. I can also ask, is there anything in your credit history that would prevent you from buying a property? That's a reasonable question after just asking, can I ask a personal question? And they said yes. So it's really gonna soften the blow of those pointed questions. That's pro tip number 4. And then I just gave you my next example as well too. So when a prospect tells you they're waiting 6 months, your question, your response is gonna be, well, what happens in 6 months? Again, curiosity based. We're still here and clarify. If you can't tell, we're really trying to figure out why in the world they're looking to make a move in the first place. So let me dive a little bit deeper on this example, and then I've got a couple more things. So if a prospect tells you they're waiting 6 months, and you're gonna ask them, hey, what happens in 6 months? And if their responses, which we're probably hearing right now, as a lot of, I think things are gonna get more affordable in the next 6 months. You could try to handle that objection head on and say like, well, here's why I don't think that's gonna happen, but I don't think you really are gonna be super effective doing that. Instead, use this pro tip and say, do you mind if I ask, like, what happens if it doesn't get more affordable in the next 6 months? Now we're opening up the conversation for them to tell us what happens if what they just told us is the objection doesn't actually happen. So do you mind me asking, because this is a little bit hard question, do you mind me asking, what happens if that doesn't happen? Now this leads us into pro tip number 5 is a little bit more advanced. So if you're a beginner in sales, this may be a little bit outside the comfort zone, but for the experts in here, this is huge for me. This is where I can get away with saying everything I need to say without sounding salesy. And this is how I personally do it. Is in this example, let's use, this is the reality check. So we're gonna use the same example we just talked about, somebody that's waiting for 6 months, and I asked, do you mind if I ask, what if that doesn't happen in 6 months? And they're gonna say, well, then I guess I'm never buying a home, right? Here's the reality check, is I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say this. And then I would go in and handle the objection. So in this example, I would hate to see us wait for the objection they just gave you, for things to get more affordable or whatever it is, and for that not to happen. Maybe for even worse, for things to actually get less affordable. I would hate to have this conversation again next year and be in the same position while things were more unaffordable. right? So what I'm doing is I'm giving myself permission to do this because I'm saying, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say this, right? So that softens the blow to, hey, we might be having the same exact conversation next year or next 6 months or whatever if we don't address the conversation now. So that's not me handling the objection up front and saying that no, it's not going to get more affordable and you need to buy now. That's a salesy way to do it. This is having the client walk down the path that maybe it does make sense for them to seriously consider this sooner than later, or at least have the conversation. All right, so now you probably have a pretty good idea, and here's the reality is you are going to stay in Clarify for a long time. Unless you really get all the meat you need right off the bat, you're gonna probably stay in Clarify for a majority of the actual conversation itself. Okay, so we've talked about clarifying. Now we're gonna move on to the label. So labeling their pain point. Now, what is a label in the first place? A label is where you're going to say, it sounds like this thing's really important to you. So think of it like you're putting a label on their forehead of what they've just described to you as their why. Why are they looking to move in the first place? And you're gonna label that on their forehead, and it's gonna be right or it's gonna be wrong. Now, there are levels to labeling, which we'll get into. There are a few reasons why labeling are so powerful, but number one is it really shows the consumer that you are listening. Now, you do actually have to listen in order to be able to label correctly or effectively, but being able to display that you just talked to somebody for 5, 10, or 15 minutes and you were able to label them in really in a sentence as far as what they're really looking for really shows that you've been actively listening. So this is something you're gonna have to practice. I recommend doing this with friends and family as well too, because it's actually really fun. So when you're putting a label on somebody, it's gonna sound like this. It's gonna sound like you really just want to take care of your family financially and you feel like buying a property is a great way to do that. That's a label. For the person that's in the 2-bedroom with 7 kids, 5 cats, and 2 dogs, your label might sound like, it sounds like your home is bursting at the seams and you need to get into something that has more space. And here's the reality. With a label, they can say, yes, Christian, that's exactly right. You might label somebody and say that it sounds like your financial situation is really important to you, or it sounds like getting an extra bedroom downstairs for your in-laws to stay with you is super important. They're gonna say, yes, Christian, that's exactly right. Or you can be wrong on a label. So it's never advised to try to be wrong on a label, but it's almost more powerful when you are wrong when you label somebody. And here's what I mean by that is, let's use the last example that I just said, is it sounds like getting a downstairs bedroom for your in-laws to stay in is the most important thing to you guys. And they might say, no, Christian, actually, as long as we have a lot big enough where we could put a casita in the back, the downstairs bedroom's not necessary. Now that might dramatically shift the thing. Or they might say, you know what, Christian, we really don't need the in-laws to stay with us. We can get them to stay somewhere else or do whatever. So this other thing is really the most important. That's where a wrong label can be very powerful. Now, what you don't want to do is go mislabeling people just to be wrong. It is coming from a genuine, I want to understand, I want to make sure that I understand. So it sounds like you really just need more space because you've got 7 kids in a 2-bedroom place. And they might say, yes, that's exactly right. Or they might say, well, it's not really about the space. It's really just we need an extra bedroom, right? So then you're clarifying on what the actual problem is. So that is what labeling sounds like. This takes a ton of work and a lot of practice. I highly recommend role playing. And the reality is this works for all different things. If you're talking to a seller, you can say your label could be something like, it sounds like your goal is to have the easiest possible sale where you don't have to deal with a lot of the heavy lifting and you really just want to get out of this and get some cash in your pocket and be done with this house. And they can say yes or no. And if they say, yeah, Christian, that's exactly right. Great. Now I really understand. So I spent the early part of the conversation clarifying so that I knew their why. I labeled the pain point that they gave and they said, yes, Christian, that's exactly right. That's the ultimate goal. Now, if I said exactly that same thing, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it sounds like you're looking to just get rid of this house and make it as easy as possible with as little heavy lifting as you can. And they say, well, actually, yeah, that would be nice, but we really need to sell the house for this much so that we can go buy this other thing. Oh, got it. So let me make sure I understand. We need to sell the house for this much money, and that thing you just mentioned is really the most important. That might totally change the solution you actually present them, which is why the label is so important. Now, label is going to take a ton of practice because labeling poorly will hurt you versus labeling very, very well will be 10 times more effective than labeling average. So this is something definitely to practice at. Practice on your friends and family because it's fun. All right, so we talked about clarify, we talked about label. Let's move on to the overview, which is really simple, but it's also easy to forget. We want to understand their why, which is clarify. We want to label their pain point. Now we want to overview what they've done so far. So let's use this example of the seller that just told us that they want to sell the house for a certain amount of money so that they can go buy something else. I might ask the question, so Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what have you done so far to make this move happen? And that's the question. That is the only script you need to know for overview is, by the way, what have you done so far to make this move happen? And again, we're still in curiosity based. I haven't sold, I haven't presented anything. I am in information gathering mode through curiosity for the majority of these conversations. So by the way, what have you done so far to make this move happen? He might say, I've got an offer from an open door. I've talked to 7 other agents. Or he might say, well, you're here, aren't you? I'm talking to you. 2 totally different scenarios that I would go from here, right? So you're just getting more information. So what have you done so far to make this move happen? And here's with tone is, so what have you done so far to make this move happen? That's how it should sound with correct tone. Pure, just dripping in curiosity is the correct way for all of these scripts that we've shared. And the reality is they'll probably answer one of 3 ways. They're going to answer, I haven't done anything yet. We're just starting, or we've done a ton of research and here's exactly where we're at. And that's the best, that you know exactly where they are at. I just used this on a listing presentation yesterday, and I got that 3rd example where I've talked to a bunch of agents. I'm just trying to find this, this, and this, and we knew exactly what we were dealing with before we had to present anything. All right, now we're gonna move on to section number 2, which is the solution, but I wanna recap what we've done so far. We have clarified why in the world this person is looking to move in the first place and why they're talking to you. You are a salesperson. Why we labeled their pain point to make sure we were correct of what we thought, and we've overviewed what they've done so far. So we know why, their motivation timeline, we know their real true pain point without the objections, and we know what they've done so far to try to solve that problem. So because of the fact we have all of this information, we are able to present a solution. We should be able to present a solution. If you don't feel confident in the solution you're about to present, you probably need to go back and clarify more. That is the big reality, is if you do not feel confident in the solution you are presenting, if you don't have a solution for them, you probably don't understand their problem enough. Or maybe you just don't have a solution and you should tell them that. All right, now, like I said, section number 2, solution. This is sell. This is the only portion in this section. Go figure, it's super important. And if you have all of the information that you would normally get from clarifying, labeling, and overviewing, this should be pretty easy. You should have some solutions built in your team. We certainly do here at Onyx Homes, but this is where your own personal solution comes in. So the goal here is to have a lead or prospect commit to a next step, whatever that next step might be. So your solution can change, but you always have them committing to a next step. That's really the goal here. That is one of the most important pieces of the sales process. All right, so S is sell the solution. So this is what we're talking about here, is this is the solution framework. This is how we come up with real solutions, and I should say how we create a script to create a solution or to present a solution to a consumer. So I'm gonna walk through this with you. And again, this is all in the download as well too, is get very, very, very good at saying the beginning portion of this. It's based on everything you've shared with me. Here's what I do for my clients that are exactly in your shoes or exactly in your same position. So let me say that again. Based on everything you've shared with me, here's what I do for all my clients who are in your exact same position. We offer this thing called name of the solution, which we cover these 3 things or 2 things. You should have 2 or 3 bullet points, no more, no less, where we come up with 3 different bullet points of what they are. Now, in the bullet points, each should sell the vacation. Now, Alex Hormozy talks about this in his training, so I'll go ahead and echo it here, is if I was giving away a trip to Hawaii, I would not sell it this way. I would not say, all right, I'm going to give you a trip to Hawaii. Here's what happened. And I wouldn't say that first. Let's say, I'm going to give you a huge free thing. I'm going to have you drive to the airport. I'm going to have you park in a parking garage for $50 a day. You're going to go through TSA and you're going to have to take off your shoes, your belt, your hoodie, all that stuff. You're going to put it all in a bag. Make sure to separate your laptop so it doesn't get taken away. And you're going to go through security, and then you're going to get all your stuff, put it back together, and you're going to sit at the gate for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, because you have to get there super early. And then you're going to sit on an airplane for 6 hours, and then you're in Hawaii. That's not how I would sell Hawaii at all. I would say, I got something amazing for you. You're going to love it. You are going to be on the best beach with a pina colada in your hand. You're going to be doing all these different things. You're going to be there for a week, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to sell the process of getting there, which is a lot of the times when somebody is selling their solution, they're going to sell the process. No, you want to sell the outcome. Nobody goes to Home Depot for a lawnmower, right? They're looking for a cut lawn. If there was a pill they could take to never have to cut their lawn and have it be perfect, they'd buy the pill versus the lawnmower, right? So selling the solution is really what we're trying to accomplish here. Just understanding that first. So here's what you're going to get really good at saying. Based on everything you've shared with me, here's what I do for all of my clients who are in your exact same position. We do this thing we call Name of Your Solution, which is where we cover 3 major things. Number 1 is this. Here's how you structure your bullet points. Number 1 is your second best thing. Number 2 is your worst thing. And number 3 is your best things. You want to finish with the best. You want to lead with the second best. The middle is kind of a filler, if you will. That's how you structure your bullet points. And then you're going to filter down. So all I would need you to do is invest X time. How long is it going to take them? Would that be a bad idea to set up? Or however you want to do that. Would that be a bad idea? Would that be a total waste of your time? You're going to do no base questions here, because here's how it sounds all in the end. And I'm going to use our how we ask for buyer strategy sessions with our team Onyx Homes. So it would sound like this. Based on everything you've shared with me, here's what we do with our clients who are in your exact same position. We do this thing we call a home buyer strategy session, which is where we cover 3 major things. First is we talk about what our clients are doing to take advantage of the market. Number 2, we talk about how we keep you protected through the entire process. And number 3, we talk about how we get you the best deal possible under whatever the circumstances are. I jokingly say it can take 20 minutes or 2 hours depending on how many questions you ask. So would that be a bad idea for you to set up? Would that be a total waste of your time? Or how does that sound? Do you want to set that up? I like no base questions because I want to say, would that be a total waste of your time? Does that sound like a bad idea? They're going to say, no, it sounds like a great idea. Because people like to say no. And if you switch to no base questions, it's a totally different training. You're going to have a lot of solutions. So there's a lot of work in the download that I would definitely highly recommend going in and doing that. But number 1 is based on everything you've shared with me so far. So this says a couple of different things. It shows you actually have clients. It shows you actually have a solution for the client and you have a name for it. It's so legit and real, right? So those are the major 2 things based on everything you've shared with me. Is I'm listening, I have a solution, I have other clients, and it's such an important solution that I actually named it. So that's number 1. Number 2 is your bullet points. And you go from number 1 being second most important, 3rd is least important, 3rd is most important. That's how you structure your bullet points. And then you're going to set the expectations of what they actually have to commit to. So that's where I jokingly say it can take 20 minutes or 2 hours. It really just depends on how many questions you ask me. The reason I say that is it might only take 20 minutes, but it also might take 2 hours because you might have so many questions. So that is something that is very powerful for the consumer as well too, to realize, like, should I have an hour and 40 minutes worth of questions? I want to give them the perception that this is a very important meeting, that they should be showing up with notes, computer, laptop, or in person, or whatever it might be, right? So that is the reality. And then ask them to make a decision. Prospects love to say no, so make their no your win. So would that be a bad idea? No, that'd be great. No, that'd be great, is what you want to be a good thing. Or no, that's not a waste of time at all. And then use no-base questions to make them think harder. So you say, do you want to do that? No. Is really easy gut reaction versus, yeah, I don't want to do that. I think that's a bad idea. So use no-based questions. Now in the download, I go into a lot more detail of the home buyer strategy session, the exact scripting and how to pull this thing apart. So pro tip number 7 is get really, 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 really good at saying the things that you say over and over and over and over again. And if you work with buyers, you work with sellers, you should be really good at your buyer strategy session and your seller strategy session or listing appointment or whatever you call it. Get really good at presenting those two things because really that's what the business is all about. Now, also, I would highly recommend you have at least 2 different levels of value. Now, what I mean by that is you should have a really, really, really valuable thing that's a little bit harder to say yes to for the consumer, meaning it's a bigger commitment. And then you should have something that is also valuable, not quite as valuable, that's easier to commit to. So that way, if they say no to this, you can move to this. I hope that makes sense. But when you ask for things that are important, you are going to get objections. So now that you are getting objections, you're able to handle those with all of the information we gathered in our clarifying stage. So when somebody gives you an objection, let me kind of walk through an example for the home buyer and the buyer strategy session. If somebody says, Christian, I've got 7 kids, 5 dogs, and 2 cats in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I want to be moved to a new house tomorrow, and that's the reason that we're looking to move. And what have I done so far? I have been looking online a ton. I've been trying to write offers with the listing agent. It just hasn't worked out, and I'm just looking for help. Let's say that's what we found out in clarifying. And if I present, based on everything you've shared with me so far, here's what I do for all my clients in your position. We go through a home buyer strategy session where we cover 1, 2, and 3, right? We go through that whole script. And they say, nah, Christian, I really don't think that's a good idea. I would look at them confused, and I would say, well, didn't you just share with me that you got 7 kids, 5 cats, 2 dogs in a 2-bedroom place, and you want to move really badly, and you're not having success in the market? Why wouldn't you want to do this? Help me understand. I don't understand this. Help me understand. And that's what we're doing, is use your timeline. You just shared with me earlier, just making sure I'm understanding, you shared with me you want to be moved into your new home as quickly as possible. And you're not having success with what you're doing right now. So help me understand why this would be a bad idea. And they're going to say something. They're going to come up with whatever type of objection. If it makes sense, maybe you pivot. Maybe you didn't understand, maybe you misunderstood, whatever. Or most likely they're going to say, well, yeah, I do. I just don't really want to do it right now. There's some nonsense excuse. And you say something along the lines of, do you really feel like it would be a waste of time to go through and really understand everything we just talked about? And go it 1 or 2 additional times. In my experience, half of the time when someone's like, well, I just really don't want to do it right now, maybe next time we talk, we can set that up. If you go at it one more time and say, well, based on everything you've shared with me, it sounds like you want to make this move happen really quickly. It sounds like you've tried a lot of things that aren't working for you. Do you really feel like it would be a waste of time to do this buyer strategy session? About half of the time, they're going to be like, you know what, you're right, we should do that. And they're going to book it right there. So that is what is easy, but it's because you had so much information from your clarifying portion that you're able to prescribe that solution. Now, if you can't, you can move on to your less valuable, easier to agree to thing, letting them know that we'll probably come back to this later. I hope that makes sense. There's a lot more information in the download as well too. I've got an easy, medium, and hard for our team. You can go through it in the download as well too. All right, so the buyer strategy session for a buyer is a high value, high difficulty, I'll say, for them to say yes to. Let's move to the mid. So middle value, easy to commit to, is what I call window shopping. So, okay, since you're not quite ready to do a strategy session yet, let's do this instead. And then I'll call it window shopping. So we'll set up a wide search. So we're doing 2 bullet points here, right? We're gonna set up a wide search so we can start to narrow these things down. Since you're not in a rush, because you just told me you weren't in a rush because of your silly objection, since you're not in a rush, we're not looking for the perfect home. We're just looking to eliminate things, right? So I'm acknowledging that they're not ready right now based on whatever they've told us. And we're gonna start with a wide search, and we're gonna start eliminating things as we get closer. Number 2, I'm also going to set you up on a monthly market update. So I'm going to keep you updated on what's going on in the market every single month. All right, so that was the 2 bullet points. Was you're going to set them up on a wide search. We're going to start narrowing things down, and then we're going to send them a monthly market update, which we do with our team. You certainly should be doing this as well too. And And then this is the call to action portion so when I get back to my office, let's say we're in person. If you're on the phone, obviously you don't have to say that, but when I get back to my office, I'm gonna send you an updated list of everything we've talked about, right? With those changes. Take a look through them, and anything you kind of sort of maybe like, let's just go out and window shopping. And the goal is not to find the perfect house, it's to narrow down the search. Because they just told us they're not quite ready yet. So we're gonna try to get them out again in person so that we can narrow down the search. That is what they're gonna do. And if they won't agree to that, you've either done something wrong or you've totally misunderstood where they're at in the process. So you might need to go to something less committed. But if you have to, you can go down from here. So to stay on the mid value is this window shopping, is the idea of giving yourself the ability to get them out to look at more property, right? So, all right, so since you're not quite ready to do that buyer strategy session yet, we'll come back to that later because it's important. But here's what we can do. There's two things. Number one, we're set you up on a wide search, and because you're not in a rush, we're not looking to find the perfect house. We're looking to just eliminate things from our search. And number two is I want to get you set up on a monthly market update. I do this for all of my clients. I keep you updated on what's going on in the housing market so you can stay informed on what's going on. So right when I get back to my office, I'm going to send you a list of all the properties that fit the search we just set up. If you kind of sort of maybe like any of them, let's just go see more houses tomorrow or next week, whatever the timeline. Sound good? And I'm looking for a commitment here. And the reality is when I get back to the office, I'm going to send them the list of properties and I'm going to text them, hey, I just sent you the properties. Did you get it? They're going to say yes or no. And you fix the problem if it's no. They're going to say yes. And then you go back and say, great, which houses do you want to set up to see tomorrow or Friday? Don't ask, do you want to see anything? Say, which homes do you want to see tomorrow or next Friday or whatever the date you had already talked about was. And like I said, if they don't agree to that, we're really moving down. You've either done something wrong, but we have to set next steps. So if they said no to the buyer strategy session, they said no to window shopping, the last thing is, all right, well then how about I send you a list of properties and we keep you updated on every market update. If I don't hear from you in the next week or 30 days or a couple of months, you're gonna insert that there. Would it be okay if I call you to make sure we're on the same page? So now we're totally moving on to just, do you ever want me to communicate with you again? So, all right, so how about this? I'll send you a list of properties and I'll keep you updated with the monthly market updates. If I don't hear from you in a week, would it be okay if I gave you a call? Or if I don't hear from you in a week, should I call you? Or if I don't hear, and here's the reality is, the reason we're putting an exact timeline on it is not necessarily gonna call them in 7 days, but the idea is we're trying to figure out, do they want us to follow up with them at all? And two, what timeline? Because if we leave this and I just say, hey, I'll send you a list of properties, send you a market update, okay, bye, and you call them in a week, they might think you're harassing them. Or if you wait a month, they were expecting a call in a week, you're dropping the ball. And it's because we didn't ask the question. So in here, you're gonna say, okay, so I'm gonna send you a list of properties and I'm gonna send you a monthly market update. If I don't hear from you in the next 30 days or so, would it be okay if I gave you a call? And they're gonna say yes or no. And if you said a week, let's say, so if I don't hear from you in a week, I'll give you a call. And they'll be like, whoa, Christian, we're really not quite there yet. Like, oh, I'm sorry. How about in a month or two? And they're gonna say, yeah, that's totally fine. Or they're gonna say, you know what, Christian, don't ever call me again. And then you at least know. So this is in your solution, this whole portion, you have to get next steps. If you do not get next steps, it is not a lead. They do not wanna work with you. You did not have any type of a solution that made sense for you guys to work together. That is the reality. So you have to set next steps, underline this, that the lead agrees to. So next steps, that the lead agrees to. And those are the three different kind of frameworks that we do. You have your highest value, hardest to get them to commit to, and then all the way on the bottom is kind of the let's stay in touch. This is the low value, super easy to commit to. And that middle portion is let's try to get out in front of them again. All right, so that is your whole sell. Now, number 3 is to confirm. Now, this is something a lot of people totally skip. Crystal clear communication. So this is something where you want to E, explain, and R, review. So going through the closer is C for clarify, label, overview, sell, explain, and review. So explain is explaining everything you just said, the next steps, you're kind of reconfirming, right? So if I'm setting up a buyer's strategy session, I'm going to say, okay, so here's what all my clients usually do. They usually ask a ton of questions. So make sure you have a pen and paper to take notes, and make sure you're at a desktop or a computer so that you can see, if you're anything like me, you're probably visual. And then I'm gonna have a slide presentation as well too for the people that are visual like me. So I'm gonna explain, you need to be at a desktop, you need to be able to take notes, you're gonna be prepared to take a lot of questions, because I don't want them to think that this is something they can do in the car. And review is just great. Right when I get back to my car, I'm gonna send you right when I get back to my computer, I'm gonna send you a calendar invite for tomorrow at 3 o'clock for that buyer strategy session. I'm gonna book it out for an hour. I'm gonna give myself an extra hour blocked off in the back just in case we do take that full 2 hours if you have a whole bunch of questions. If not, I'll just book for that first hour and it'll be totally fine, or whatever the time frame is. But the point here is we are explaining exactly what their expectations are, and we're reviewing. There's two things. One, you're gonna set yourself up for a better appointment. And two is, if there is an objection, they will tell you, and they will, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. I did not know we were gonna be on Zoom. I thought this was just a quick phone call, which means your pitch is way off. So explain and review is really simple, but it's just making sure you're not gonna get ghosted at the appointment. So you're gonna explain exactly what they need to do to be ready, and you're gonna review how exactly it's gonna work and what's gonna happen next, making sure you set their expectations. So that is the entire closer framework. This is something you're gonna have in almost every sales approach. It works everywhere. This is something where when you're setting next steps, you are gonna be looping the closer framework over and over and over and over again. So getting used to saying those things, return to this training as much as you need. There's a download in there as well too, where you have all the scripts in there. There's a little bit more information to download than we covered in this video, but make sure you come back and listen for the tonalities and everything. I know this was a lot. I hope you found it super valuable. We're gonna have a full training on this. Make sure you are in the start to finish community if you are not already. Make sure you're on our newsletter as well too at onyxhomes.com/blog. So I hope this was valuable. Share it with a friend if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.